Welcome to Careers in Discovery, your window into the world of biotech leaders. On each episode, we interview the industry's leading executives to understand how they built their careers, what they've learned along the way, and the advice they'd give to their younger selves. This time on Careers in Discovery, Emma Hobbs is with Arvid Söderhall, physicist and biotech innovator. Arvid is the project leader at Empros Pharma, who are approaching obesity with a pharmaceutical approach to gastric bypass surgery. And he spoke with Emma about the challenges of developing very innovative treatments in a competitive field, the absolute importance of adapting to an ever-changing market landscape, and discovering his leadership potential while seizing unexpected opportunities along the way.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Careers in Discovery. I'm joined by Arvid Söderhall from Empros Pharma based in Sweden. Welcome, Arvid.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here.
I suppose a great place to start would be talking a little bit about the work that Empros Pharma are doing to develop new drugs in obesity.
Yes. Yeah, we've been doing this for almost 11 years now. So we started off this project once upon a time when the obesity wasn't such a hype as it is today.
Yeah.
Some said that it was a venture capital graveyard, even that there was no money to be earned there. There's been a lot of major failures in the obesity development space. But anyhow, we had this idea about the drug product that we're now developing, and we thought that this is actually something too good to just let go. And we kept on since. And now, the last few years, with the recent successes of obesity medications, our situation has dramatically changed, and the landscape, and nobody would claim that obesity is a graveyard for venture capital anymore.
No, definitely not.
So we are now in a completely different spot, so to say. The project started back in 2013, and there was this pediatrician, an expert in pediatric obesity, who's also founder of the company. And he came with this idea to combine two well-known and well-established drug products called orlistat and acarbose. And they've been around for ages, used by millions of patients. The only job that those two drugs are doing is to prevent the uptake of fat and carbohydrates. So they stay in the gastrointestinal tract. They're blocking the enzymes digesting the fat and the carbohydrate. And he was thinking, if you could not necessarily just block the uptake of the nutrients, but actually move the uptake of the nutrients from wherever in the small intestine to the lower part of the small intestine, and let the body absorb the energy in the lower part of the small intestine, then you could actually do something like a pharmaceutical gastric bypass. That was kind of his idea.
Right. Okay.
And the point with the surgery, the gastric bypass surgeries, the bypass, that's the trick. So you're bypassing the upper part of the small intestine, and you have still the lower part of the small intestine there.
Yeah.
And the nice thing with doing such a bypass is that in the lower part of the small intestine, you have a lot of sensory cells.
Right.
That feels that, okay, there's a lot of food still in the small intestine, so don't eat anymore, because it will go on to the large intestine and you have no absorption down there. So the body starts to signal satiety.
Right.
So the bypass that you do in the surgery is actually triggering the endogenous, your own satiety response. So you feel really full when you have a lot of nutrients in the lower part of the small intestine. So that was his basic idea, to use those two drug products to not necessarily prevent, but rather move the energy uptake to the lower part of the small intestine, and thereby triggering the endogenous satiety response. So that was kind of where it all started, this story.
Yeah.
To take those two drug products, make a new clever formulation, and see whether it flies.
And is that the path that you're still on today?
Correct. Yeah, this is what we're doing.
Fantastic.
And we've done 4 clinical trials on this drug product, and we've seen great data. We see that the drug product works the way that we want it. The patients are losing weight, and in the long term, we also need to demonstrate if they can actually persistently stay on the medication for a longer period of time. And also one very important aspect of obesity, which has become more and more evident the last few years when Ozempic and these drugs have become so popular, is that if you quit using the drug product, you're rebounding weight. That's the main character of obesity. It's a chronic disease. So we want to be able to show that you can actually mitigate or stop the rebound effect and really stay on a new low body weight. If you have lost your weight, the GLP-1s, the Ozempic is excellent for losing weight, but not necessarily very, very good when it comes to actually staying on that low new weight that you got, so to speak. So that is where we're heading now.
Yeah, excellent. And like you said, obesity is a very hot topic, particularly in the UK media. I see a lot of stories challenging the safety of some of the newer products. How does that affect the perception when you're looking to bring a new drug to market?
I mean, there will always be arguments, and there are certainly patients who don't tolerate the new drug products. And not tolerating it, or actually there are also reports of severe serious concerns and so forth. And this is the way that any drug works. So there are no safe drugs. There are always drawbacks with them. I mean, with some rare exceptions, sure. And you have to be aware of that. And that is why you should use any new drug product, or any drug for that matter, with caution, and you should follow the prescription of medications and don't try to fiddle around at home. That is a recipe for disaster for sure if you do that. And I mean the new drug product, they deserve all credits. They are fantastic drugs for weight loss, and I would say that they've been used for type 2 diabetes for quite many years. So there are actually long-term safety data on that as well. So I mean, they are fairly safe. But having said that, they're definitely not the silver bullet who solves all the problem.
Yeah.
Obesity is a super complex disease. I used to make the analogy that obesity is as mature as oncology was in the 1940s.
Yeah.
So once upon a time, it's kind of a crazy thing. So in the 1940s, after the Second World War, some medics, I mean, they realized that, okay, the mustard gas is actually potent for some type of leukemia. So they started to play around with mustard gas, and that was the first type of chemotherapy that came out.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, so that was kind of the point where chemotherapy in oncology started once upon a time. And now we know, I mean, the history has developed the oncology space. So there's not just cancer in general, but there are a whole, I mean,
thousands
of different cancer forms. And when a patient go to the clinic and you suspect cancer, then you go to the doctor who know that particular type of cancer.
Yeah.
Whereas today in the obesity space is pretty much the other way around. So you're suffering from some kind of health, related disorder, and you suspect that it might be connected to obesity. And if you start to talk to a nutritionist, then you get the diet. If you start to talk to your neighbors, then you get some other kind of advices. If you start to talk to an endocrinologist, then you get, I mean, so it's like if the only tool you got is a hammer, all problems look like a nail.
Yeah.
So, and this is really where obesity is now. So there's not just one type of obesity, but there's many different types of obesity related to so many different things.
Yeah.
And the new drug products coming out on the market now, they are for sure super good at some certain forms of obesity, but they're definitely not for all.
Yeah. Oh, really interesting. Thank you for explaining. I suppose I'd like to go back to your early career and how you decided that a career in science, particularly drug discovery, was where you wanted to be?
I really don't know when I realized I wanted to be in drug discovery, I think, but I've always had a feel for natural sciences, biology, physics, chemistry, and so forth. And I had a little bit of skill for maths. So I started off studying physics at the university. And I graduated as a physicist, and then I started my studies, my PhD studies in physical chemistry and some kind of theoretical biophysics or biochemistry. It was quite a tough work. I kind of had the feeling that this is what I like. I like science. And during the time that I did my PhD, I also realized that drug discovery seemed to be cool. And there was, I mean, I realized that this is there is probably some type of future or career possibility within this space. And so I did that. And then, so it was probably during the time when I did my PhD, I realized that the drug discovery is where I want to go.
Yeah.
But I had no clue how to get there. So I did a PhD, and then I did a postdoc, more specific into pharmacology. I was in postdoc in Berlin for a couple of years, and then I got my first job back in Sweden again, and then I was a project manager at a small biotech company called Zydec Technologies. And it was when I was at Zydec, I realized something that I didn't know about myself is the leadership skills that I have. So I realized that I'm kind of a leader type of person. And during my PhD and also during the period of my postdoc, I had no clue. I thought I was a scientist. But I realized eventually that I'm probably at least a project manager.
And was that based on feedback from others that helped you realize that you were a leader, or was it something that caught your attention as you're looking at options? How do you reflect?
Feedback. That was really feedback from others. Because I got cred for making things happen. I mean, since I've always made things happen, this is something that I thought was pretty natural, that people make things happen. But being in a professional setting, I realized that this is not the case. Some people are really, really good in science, and they're really good in making good science, but not necessarily making things happen out of the science. So you can keep on doing excellent science, but what is actually progressing or turning it into something more than just science, if I put it a bit blunt. And have the how should I put it, I mean recognize that some people are super good in science, and they should be promoted for that, and they should be doing the good science and really driving the science ahead and making that part of work, whereas others are making things happen, just anything happen.
Kind of looking at the bigger picture, thinking forward. Is that what you mean?
I mean, scientists obviously think forward as well, but it's also about connecting things to one another. If you're really in depth into science, then you prefer to really stay on the forefront of the scientific community and see how are we pushing the science forward. But it maybe as a project manager, you're a little bit more not as open as in academia, that you want to kind of get out with all the science all over the world, but you are actually wanting to develop a certain project. And steering towards, I mean, business. I mean, you're steering towards business achievements. And disregardless, not regarding scientific progress necessarily. So, scientific publication It's definitely not a goal in itself, but it's one of the means. And the goal in itself is something else. And also, making sure that science work together with all the other things in the company.
Yeah.
Like human resources, financials, customers, and so forth. And being able to connect customers, science, human resources, business goals, and so forth into a picture or into context that makes sense for the company.
Yeah.
So that was kind of something that I realized during the time back then at SciDec.
Yeah. And then once you'd identified that as your passion and your strengths, how did you then go to formulate the rest of your career from SciDec?
Well, SciDec went up like sunshine and down like a pancake.
Which we laugh, but it's sad, and it happens a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah,
we have to take risks, and they don't always pay off.
Absolutely, and it was also a period in my life when, so I got young kids at home, and I mean mortgage on the house and blah blah blah. So I was kind of in a fairly tough place at the time.
Yeah.
So I flipped over into a completely different job at a think tank, policy making think tank called the Royal Academy of Engineering Sciences. So that's kind of a Swedish type of think tank, working with politics. And then we were working with all kind of things like transportation system, services. I was working with many different, energy system and so forth. So very broad, and I was managing projects in that, also policy making, policy building projects. So I was there for about 5 years in a completely different setting. And eventually, and that was more, promoting my skills as being a project manager and making things happen, and making people work together, and making people wanting to work together. Not because the way that think tank works is that you're using people's mind that are not on the payroll. So you have to encourage them to do something, to contribute at will, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
bringing them into that common goal, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. So without the possibility of actually paying them, but really asking them to do services and help you to promote towards a larger goal, a policy goal, a political goal. Yeah. So I was there for quite some time, and then I realized, okay, I really want to get back into life science, because after all, I'm also a scientist, and I got this PhD and working at the think tank and talking about transportation system. I got no use of my PhD in physical chemistry. So I was a project manager for a project promoting clinical trials in Sweden.
Okay.
So clinical trials is something which is super important. If you want to have a healthcare system really staying on the forefront and doing the best for the patients, you need a lot of science rolling in the healthcare system, and you need clinical trials. And like, I think we share this with quite many Western countries, that the clinical trials are going down, and the healthcare system is more like just, treating the patients for every day, and just do what you're supposed to do at work as a physicist, physician, and then don't spend too much time on flying
it's
around.
Stretched.
So I did this policy project of promoting more clinical trials, or clinical trials, in particular sponsored clinical trials in Sweden, in order to engage and attract companies to conduct clinical trials here. And that became kind of a stepping stone for me from this think tank and into the job that I got now. So I was headhunted from that think tank organization into the position that I've got now. because it was a startup company. You need somebody who's well connected, can run projects, understand clinical trials, and also the PhD, obviously. So it was kind of how I got where I am today.
Everything slotted nicely into place. And I believe you were employee number 1 for Empros.
Yes, correct. Yeah. Because it was a startup, and it always starts with one. Or I mean, okay, can start with several, but quite often it starts with one, and then the project manager at the time, to get things going. And I suppose from my own view, I've always had this. Or since I did the PhD, I wanted to work in drug discovery. Or drug development. And it took me to this place in a very crazy way, in a way. So really winding road. When this SciDec went down like a pancake, I was really, I needed to get a new job quick. And I took this chance of just jumping onto something completely different, and that turned into be quite a good decision in a way.
Yeah. And then to take a sidestep, you've all very much accelerated your career in the last 10 years by it being a very wise decision to join Empros.
Yeah, I think it did actually. The type of work that I did at the time, I was also one more thing that I realized during my time at this think tank, the Royal Academy of Engineering and Sciences, is that I'm good in presenting. And I'm good in speaking in front of audience. And this is something that I also didn't really knew before. And also, I mean, when you speak in front of an audience, one common problem is that the audience is very broad, and they have various types of backgrounds. And the audience that we had at the think tank could be anything. I mean, politicians, it could be scientists, could be executives at companies in a wide sector. And I realized also these very, very prominent individuals, having fantastic background and being super clever. I mean, they're just humans as well. And if you want to present something, you got to make it simple. So if you're in the transportation system and think mostly about how to build railways, and I want to explain something which is about clinical trials for them, then I really have to adapt the message to make things simple, to boil it down to a simple plate so you get the audience with you, and then you can build up on that. And not sorry for that, and not assume that people are up to speed with you, but really making sure that you got the audience with you. That's an experience that I've used a lot since. Basically, don't assume that the audience understand what you're doing, and don't. It's not. I mean, I don't think I've ever made a seminar where I've patted people on their heads, so to speak, or started too low. But I mean, if you realize that, hey, this audience does have a serious background, then you can kind of speed up a bit during the speech. And then when you have started to speed up, and if you start to lose people, then you may basically have to back down a little bit, so you get the people with you, and to get the message through, so to speak.
So being mindful and making sure that you can really tell the story so that it's understood and create engagement.
Exactly.
It's really important. What piece of advice, if you were to people early in their careers, maybe looking to move outside of academia, or who are trying to decide which PhD to study, what piece of advice would you give to people in that situation?
I would say that I mean, don't try to predict future, but rather try to keep doors open, and be prepared for opportunities that appears in front of you. And sometimes it's opportunities, it's chances. You're headhunted into something fantastic. That's obviously an opportunity. And other times it is not an opportunity. It's rather a some kind of disaster that's happening in life. So you really have to take a step, such as being fired from a job, because it happens occasionally. And shifts. So be open for that, and don't try to work out in beforehand what's going to happen. It's and it's also normal if you're making your PhD. Doing the PhD, that's tough work. And it's not particularly rewarding if you get out your publications and then think, are anybody reading my publications? And if so, then it's some professor on the other side of the world that might think it's thrilling, but your friends and family don't really find it thrilling. And so it's a tough work. And it's not as it takes so long time to really get the credit for the work that you're doing. But don't despair. Having a PhD is really a good thing. It's a really good thing to have in your CV, and it can take you further on in the way that you wouldn't expect to start with. And if you have made your PhD in one particular field, so I did it in physical chemistry, doing complicated mathematical simulations. That's what I've done. And what I'm doing right now has nothing to do with complicated mathematical simulations, but still the PhD in itself, the ability to really learn fast, digest a lot of information and these kind of things, and also understand how science works and what is really good science. That is something that is very generic, that you can use in so many different contexts. So don't lock yourself up into a particular niche in science, but rather, be open for that. And also, one thing that I also would like to give as general advice, if you've done your PhD, don't ever think that you know everything about yourself. So I've been surprised several times in my life, and also long past I got the PhD, that, oh my God, I'm actually a leader. I didn't know. And also I also realized that I'm a good presenter, and I didn't know. Presenting academic stuff or science is a completely different matter than presenting a business idea.
That's really interesting. Do you think the leadership and the presentation skills were always there, or do you think they're things that developed as you grew?
Difficult question. I think the leadership, was the embryo was always there. I think, but it was in many circumstances and contexts, it's a mess to be a leader. If you're not in a leading position, but you're actually a leader, then it turns out into a mess instead, and then you're a difficult person.
Potentially unhappy because you're not fulfilling your potential.
Exactly. I mean, it's a very, it can be kind of frustrating, and I mean, being in school, then you're not supposed to be a leader, but you're supposed to be people or student. And when you want to sit in a driving position, but you're not in the driving position, it is a type of a type of career which doesn't really fit. And so be open to who you are, and if you have some type of desire in you or whatever, it can also be, it's not just time for that now. I mean, await the correct time, the right timing for exploring and developing other aspects of yourself, so to speak.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your advices. What's next? What's next for Arvid? What's next for Empros?
So we are, like many biotechs nowadays, it is a really tough climate financially, and we are continuing the progress of our clinical development. We need to pursue the clinical trials further. We've done 4 trials altogether now, and we need more clinical data in order to support the whole project. And as I said in the beginning, so now it becomes a little bit more complicated, but since the obesity space is developing in the way it is now, there are so many uncertainties what path to make and what are the different niches within the obesity space. What are the most important features, and how should we position the drug product that we're developing. When we started this project off back in 2013, there were no GLP-1 agonists available for the treatment of obesity. They were coming out for type 2 diabetes and so forth, but the successes are surprising us as well, and the market pull, the desire for patients to get access to Ozempic and alike, and that really changes the way that we have to work as well. So it's both pursuing the clinical development and steering the clinical development into the niches where our drug product remains, or belongs rather, so that we don't go too broad, but rather narrowing it down to a segment of obesity, to really, so that we meet this unmet medical need that there are. So it's both financial work to finance the continued development of the drug product, but it's also a significant part of strategic work. So where are we actually going with this drug product? That is also and that's a super exciting piece of work.
There's certain risks to take, but a lot of strategic work and planning that you can do to mitigate those risks.
That's inherent in developing drug products. There's an inherent risk. It's always there, and you have to be if you want to work in drug development, you have to remind yourself every now and then that most of the drug products is just a development project that ends somewhere. And that is the way it is. It is super complicated world to be in, because it's so much deep science. It's so much about regulatory. It's about market aspects. It's about education of both patient or physicians or whatever. So it's so many aspects in drug development, which is make things very complicated, and that it takes so long time to develop a drug product. Also, you have to steer on a moving target all the time. So most drug products fails for natural reasons, and they should fail, but not necessarily the organizations, and definitely not the individuals working with it. So if you're failing in one project, like I did with the Sidec, then taking a step to the side and do something else, then in such a way the development project are not failure, but they're actually building a stock of individuals and stock of competence that can be exploited in a new setting.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your stories and your learns and advice, and wish you and Empros all the best for the future.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe and share it with someone else you think will benefit. And for more podcasts, videos, blogs and insights, come follow me, Tom Froggatt, on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Medium or TikTok. See you next time.